Beneath a veil of sorrow and mystery lies a secret that will shatter the boundaries of time. A cryptic letter, an age-old map, and a hidden passage under a forgotten grave beckon one man to unravel a legacy steeped in sacrifice and defiance. Subscribe now for more riveting tales of hidden truths and transformative journeys. This is a story where every heartbeat echoes with the resilience of generations past. The journey begins. The rain fell in a constant, mournful cadence as Jerome stood before the freshly dug grave. The sky was a dull slate, and every droplet seemed to echo the heavy sorrow that burdened his heart. Today, as he said his final farewell to the woman who had been his anchor, his beloved grandmother, he felt the bitter sting of abandonment and loneliness. The funeral had been somber, filled with whispered condolences and hesitant embraces. Yet, amid the muted sympathy of acquaintances and distant neighbors, something unexpected stirred in the shadow of grief. While his eyes fixated on the polished casket slowly being lowered into the earth, a subtle movement at the edge of the cemetery caught his attention. An elderly woman, her silver hair damp from the persistent drizzle, lingered near the rusted iron gate. Her gaze was intense, almost as if she carried a secret meant solely for him. As the crowd began to dissipate, leaving behind a forlorn silence punctuated only by the gentle patter of rain on cold stone, she approached him with measured steps. Her long, dark coat swept the sodden ground as she neared, and her lined face bore the marks of many untold stories. Without a word, she extended a trembling hand and pressed into his palm an old, weathered envelope. "For you," she said in a soft, almost musical tone that belied the gravity of her act. Jerome's pulse quickened as he glanced down at the envelope. Its paper was yellowed by time, the edges frayed and delicate, and the handwriting on the front was unmistakably familiar. A careful, elegant script that he recognized from birthday cards and notes lovingly left on the refrigerator door during his childhood. His grandmother had always been a beacon of warmth and guidance, and now, even in death, she reached out to him. Questions swirled in his mind as he clutched the envelope against his chest. Who was this mysterious messenger? Why had his grandmother chosen such a secretive method to deliver one final message? The cemetery, usually a place of quiet reflection, now pulsed with an enigmatic energy. Jerome felt as though the ground itself was concealing secrets, just as he now held a secret in his trembling hands. The old woman melted into the swirling mist as quickly as she had appeared, leaving behind only the memory of her piercing gaze. The envelope seemed to throb with importance, carrying the promise of revelations from the past, a past that was about to unravel in ways he could scarcely imagine. With the envelope as his only clue, Jerome stepped away from the gravesite, the chill in the air now matching the chill of uncertainty that had taken root inside him. In that moment, between the sorrow of loss and the mystery of the unknown, a subtle transformation began. His grief was slowly replaced by a sense of purpose, a calling that urged him to look deeper into the legacy left behind by the woman who had raised him with endless love. The rain, as if in quiet affirmation, continued its relentless descent as Jerome made his way home. Clutched tightly in his hand, the envelope promised not only the remembrance of his grandmother, but also the stirring of a destiny he was only beginning to comprehend. In the solitude of his cramped apartment, Jerome sat on the edge of a worn armchair, the dim glow of a single lamp casting long, wavering shadows on the faded wallpaper. With trembling hands, he finally broke the seal of the envelope. As the aged paper split open, a carefully folded letter emerged, accompanied by a delicate, hand-drawn map. His heart pounded in his chest as he unfolded the letter, the familiar, graceful handwriting of his grandmother filling the page with tender words that bridged the gap between life and death. "Dear Jerome," the letter began, "if you are reading these words, then fate has seen fit to deliver you a message from beyond. I have always believed that our family holds a secret legacy, one that has been guarded through generations. It is not merely a matter of wealth, but of purpose, a burden and a gift intertwined. You have been chosen to continue a mission that began long before your time." As he read further, each sentence deepened the mystery, weaving together memories of a past filled with both hardship and hope. His grandmother recounted tales of ancestors who had struggled against injustice, their lives marked by resilience and determination. Yet, she hinted at a final truth, one that she had hidden until the moment was right. Tucked beneath the letter was a meticulously drawn map of the old cemetery, a map that pinpointed a specific location with a single, bold word scrawled in her familiar hand: dig. The instruction was both simple and startling, and Jerome's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, the command defied every instinct of reverence and propriety. On the other, it pulsed with the undeniable force of destiny. His grandmother had always been forthright about the hardships that marred their family history, but she had never spoken of hidden legacies or secret instructions buried among the tombstones. With each passing moment, Jerome's initial shock gave way to a burning curiosity. The map, though crudely drawn, marked an area in the cemetery that seemed long forgotten, a section where the tombstones were worn smooth by the passage of time. The letter concluded with a plea: "Trust your heart, dear Jerome, and follow the path laid out before you. In this life, you are more than what the world sees. You are our legacy, and within you lies the power to reclaim what has been lost." Those words reverberated in his mind as he traced the route on the map with his finger, feeling as though he were running his hands over the very fibers of his heritage. For hours, Jerome sat in silence, contemplating the weight of the revelation. The letter was not just a farewell from a cherished grandmother. It was a call to action, an invitation to uncover the secrets that had been buried beneath layers of sorrow and neglect. Outside, the rain continued its steady murmur, as if urging him onward, and inside, a new resolve began to form. His life, once defined by quiet despair and unfulfilled dreams, now shimmered with the promise of discovery and redemption. With the map and the letter as his guide, Jerome resolved that at dawn he would return to the cemetery. He knew not what dangers or truths awaited him there, but the pull of destiny was irresistible, a force that demanded he dig beneath the surface of the familiar to unearth the extraordinary. That night, when the world lay silent under the cloak of darkness, Jerome found himself once again beneath the vast, indifferent sky. The cemetery, now transformed by the pale luminescence of a full moon, appeared both ethereal and foreboding. The aged stone markers, worn and moss-covered, whispered secrets of lives long past. Clad in a waterproof jacket and clutching a sturdy shovel, he navigated the narrow, winding paths with a mix of trepidation and determination. The map's instructions had led him to a secluded section of the graveyard, a forgotten part where the tombstones leaned precariously, their inscriptions nearly erased by time and neglect. Every step was heavy with anticipation as Jerome reached the spot marked on the map. Here, the earth seemed to hold its breath. He knelt beside an ancient tombstone that, even in its dilapidated state, radiated an aura of significance. The inscription was nearly illegible, but a date caught his eye, a date that hinted at an era long removed from his own turbulent modern existence. The weight of history pressed down on him as he positioned the shovel, recalling his grandmother's gentle yet insistent words. With a deep exhale, he began to dig. The soft thud of his tool against the damp soil was the only sound in the hushed night. As he excavated, the earth revealed its secrets bit by bit. His muscles ached from the relentless effort, yet a fervor burned within him that eclipsed any physical fatigue. The further he dug, the more he felt as though he were unearthing not just soil, but the buried memories of generations. Suddenly, his shovel struck something far more solid than mere earth, a hard, wooden object that resonated with an unexpected solidity. Jerome paused, heart pounding, and cleared away the dirt to expose a heavy, weathered wooden panel embedded in the ground. The panel bore intricate carvings, symbols that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight with an otherworldly glow. They were designs unlike any he had ever seen, a mixture of ancient heraldry and personal insignia, perhaps belonging to his own bloodline. With trembling fingers, he pried at the panel. It gave way with a reluctant creak, revealing a narrow, dark passage leading downward into the unknown. The opening exhaled a cold, musty breath, as if it had been sealed away for centuries, preserving within it the silent echoes of forgotten voices. Jerome's mind raced. The revelation was both astonishing and terrifying. His grandmother's cryptic letter had spoken of a hidden legacy, but never had he imagined that it would begin beneath a gravestone, in an underground corridor that defied logic and tradition. The weight of his decision pressed upon him. Should he retreat into the safety of ignorance or embrace the mystery that beckoned him further? With his heart pounding like a war drum, he steadied himself and stepped into the passage. Each careful movement sent ripples of anticipation along his spine, and as he descended, the world above faded away into a distant memory. In that silent, shadowy corridor, Jerome realized that the past and present were colliding. Every stone and every carved symbol told a story of sacrifice, struggle, and a secret heritage that demanded to be acknowledged. The air was thick with the perfume of damp earth and ancient resolve. The darkness, rather than being an enemy, became a canvas upon which the legacy of his ancestors was about to be reborn. With only the beam of his flashlight guiding him, Jerome's footsteps echoed off the cold stone walls, marking the beginning of a journey that would forever alter the course of his life. The narrow passage eventually widened into an expansive underground chamber, a hidden sanctum that seemed suspended between time and memory. Jerome's flashlight revealed rough-hewn stone walls, their surfaces scarred with age and mystery. The chamber exuded an atmosphere of quiet reverence, as if it were a sacred vault of secrets left undisturbed for decades, or perhaps centuries. In the center of the room, shrouded in layers of dust and cobwebs, lay an ancient wooden table upon which rested an assortment of relics. A leather-bound journal, brittle parchments, and a small, ornate box whose intricate designs echoed those he had seen on the panel above. Jerome's breath caught in his throat as he approached the table, his heart thrumming in anticipation. With careful, deliberate motions, he reached for the journal. The cover was embossed with symbols he recognized from the carved panel, familiar motifs that now spoke to him in the language of his lineage. As he opened it, the fragile pages unfurled like the wings of a long-forgotten memory. The journal's entries were written in a hurried, yet elegant hand. They recounted the struggles and triumphs of a man who had lived in an era marred by injustice and oppression, a great-great-grandfather whose life had been a constant battle against forces that sought to subjugate his people. Every line of the journal resonated with the fervor of defiance and the quiet hope of revolution. His ancestor had chronicled secret meetings in dimly lit rooms, the careful transfer of funds stolen from tyrants, and the creation of clandestine networks designed to empower a community burdened by systemic neglect. One passage, in particular, leaped from the yellowed pages. If you are reading these words, then our struggle endures. The legacy we carry is not measured in gold alone, but in the strength of our resolve. Our past is fraught with pain, yet within it lies the promise of redemption. Jerome felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes as the weight of these revelations pressed upon him. His blood, thick with the history of resilience and rebellion, pulsed in tandem with the words written long ago. Lying beside the journal, the ornate box beckoned with an almost magnetic allure. Jerome hesitated before opening it, aware that whatever lay within might seal his fate. With steady determination, he lifted the lid to reveal bundles of old currency, faded documents, and what appeared to be a final letter, its paper smoother and more recent than the others, as if preserved by deliberate care. The letter, penned in his grandmother's own hand, read, "My dear Jerome, our family has guarded a secret for generations. This treasure is not meant for personal gain, but to fuel a legacy of justice. Use it wisely, and let it be the spark that ignites change." The words resonated deeply, stirring emotions of hope and trepidation in equal measure. Surrounded by the tangible echoes of his ancestors' sacrifices, Jerome felt a profound connection to a history he had never truly understood until now. The hidden chamber was not merely a repository of valuables. It was a testament to a lineage that had dared to defy oppression and carve out a space for dignity amid despair. In that moment, as he held the journal and the box with reverence, Jerome realized that his life was now inextricably entwined with the fate of those who had come before him. The chamber, silent and hallowed, had spoken volumes without uttering a single word. It was time to embrace the legacy, to face the moral and existential dilemmas that awaited him in the days to come. With the journal cradled in one arm and the ornate box set aside for the moment, Jerome sank onto a cold stone bench in the hidden chamber. His eyes roamed over the faded script, each entry of the journal a key unlocking chapters of a past fraught with adversity and unyielding courage. He learned that his great-great-grandfather had once been a man of indomitable spirit, a rebel, a visionary who had dared to challenge an oppressive regime that sought to keep his people subjugated. The journal painted a portrait of a man who risked everything to secure freedom and dignity, channeling stolen wealth to forge secret alliances and empower those who had been silenced for far too long. As Jerome delved deeper into the narrative, he discovered vivid accounts of clandestine meetings held in the dead of night, the hushed tones of revolution echoing in underground corridors, and the desperate struggles against a tyrannical force that used wealth and power to maintain control. His ancestor had meticulously chronicled how he diverted funds from corrupt officials and used them to fund safe havens, education, and resistance movements. In one particularly haunting entry, he described the fateful night when enemy forces discovered his activities, a night when he barely escaped with his life, leaving behind a final, cryptic message. If you find these words, know that our fight transcends time. The legacy is now yours, not for personal gain, but as a beacon for change. Jerome's heart pounded as the enormity of the revelation washed over him. This was no mere tale of ancestral valor. It was a call to arms, a burden of responsibility that had been passed down through blood and sacrifice. His great-great-grandfather's unwavering determination in the face of overwhelming odds stirred something deep within him. It was as if every word etched on those fragile pages ignited a dormant fire, urging him to honor the sacrifices made long ago. The notion that his lineage had once carried the spark of revolution, the hope of redemption through collective empowerment, was both inspiring and daunting. Amidst the journal's chronicles of hardship, Jerome encountered passages that hinted at a deeper, almost mystical connection between the family's fortunes and a secret legacy. His ancestor had spoken of a sacred trust, one that was not measured solely by wealth, but by the willingness to risk everything in pursuit of justice and equality. This legacy, it seemed, was a divine inheritance, a sacred duty to uplift the oppressed and dismantle the structures of tyranny that had long held sway over their community. Jerome could feel the weight of this destiny pressing upon him, as if the echoes of the past demanded that he take up the mantle of leadership. For hours, he pored over the journal, each entry weaving a tapestry of triumphs and tragedies, of battles fought with both pen and sword. In the flickering beam of his flashlight, Jerome saw not just the faded ink on brittle pages, but the living spirit of a man who had never surrendered to despair. His great-great-grandfather had left behind more than just memories. He had bequeathed a challenge, a puzzle that now demanded to be solved. And as Jerome closed the journal, he realized that the ornate box and the final letter were not isolated treasures. They were the keys to a destiny that would shape not only his future, but the future of an entire community. With newfound resolve, Jerome vowed to honor this sacred trust, even as doubts and fears whispered in the dark recesses of his mind. After hours spent deciphering the secrets of the journal, Jerome's attention shifted back to the ornate wooden box resting on the table. Its intricate carvings, which had once evoked the storied past of his ancestors, now seemed to pulse with a silent promise. He recalled the final letter from his grandmother, a message urging him to use the inheritance not for personal gain, but as a catalyst for change. With a deep breath, he carefully lifted the fragile lid once more. Inside, he found carefully bundled stacks of old currency, each note a faded relic from a bygone era. Interspersed with the bills were several documents, worn legal papers, handwritten ledgers, and what appeared to be an additional envelope containing a note more recent than the others. The money, though clearly aged, retained a tangible value, not just in its material form, but as a testament to a time when wealth was stealthily reclaimed from the grasp of tyranny. Jerome's fingers traced the contours of the currency, and he could almost hear the echoes of clandestine transactions and whispered agreements made in the dark. The documents, fragile yet defiant, chronicled the financial maneuvers of his ancestor, a secret fund that had been amassed over years of covert operations. Each page was a story in itself, a narrative of risk, rebellion, and a relentless pursuit of justice against overwhelming odds. Amid the trove of relics, a particular document caught his eye, a final letter, distinct from his grandmother's earlier message. This letter was penned in bold, deliberate strokes, urging the reader, Jerome, to understand that this inheritance was not simply a sum of money to be hoarded or squandered. It was a resource meant to heal, to empower a community that had long been denied the chance to flourish. This treasure, the letter declared, is a legacy of hope and resilience. Use it to forge a future where the oppressed rise, where the voiceless speak, and where justice prevails over tyranny. The words resonated deeply within him, stirring a mix of awe and apprehension. Standing alone in the hidden chamber, with the soft echo of his heartbeat and the distant murmur of his own thoughts as his only companions, Jerome felt the full force of destiny bearing down upon him. The ornate box was more than a mere container of money and paper. It was a vessel carrying the dreams, struggles, and sacrifices of generations. In that moment, the inheritance became both a beacon and a burden. It promised the possibility of transformation, of rewriting a narrative marred by injustice. Yet it also demanded courage, wisdom, and an unyielding commitment to a cause far greater than himself. Jerome's mind raced with the possibilities. The money could free him from the relentless grip of poverty, grant him the luxury of a new life far removed from his painful past. But the documents told a different story, a story of responsibility, of using power to uplift others, and of fighting the entrenched systems that had once tried to crush his family's spirit. As he carefully repacked the documents and the bills, Jerome made a silent vow. He would not let this legacy be tarnished by selfish desires. Instead, he would honor his ancestors by transforming this buried treasure into a force for change. The decision was clear, even as the enormity of the task ahead loomed large. In that secret chamber beneath the cemetery, Jerome embraced his newfound destiny, a legacy not of wealth alone, but of purpose and the unyielding pursuit of justice. In the days that followed his midnight venture into the cemetery, Jerome found himself torn between two worlds. On one hand, the tangible weight of the inheritance, the stacks of aged money and historical documents, whispered promises of liberation from the struggles that had haunted him for years. The idea of disappearing into a new life, far from the pain and systemic neglect that had long defined his existence, was as tempting as it was seductive. His small apartment, which had once been a sanctuary from a harsh world, now seemed like a prison of memories and missed opportunities. The prospect of using the treasure to escape, to simply vanish and start over in a place where no one knew his name, tugged at him like a siren's call. Yet, in quiet moments when the world around him stilled and the ghosts of the past pressed in, Jerome would recall the gentle, firm voice of his grandmother. Her parting words, etched in the letter and borne out by the legacy of his ancestors, urged him to look beyond personal salvation. The documents had told him that the inheritance was meant to be a tool, a resource to uplift a community that had suffered under the weight of systemic injustice. His great-great-grandfather's struggles and sacrifices were not meant to be erased by a hasty flight into anonymity. Instead, they demanded recognition and action, a commitment to something far larger than the promise of an easy escape. During long, sleepless nights, Jerome sat by the window, watching rain blur the city lights into a watery mosaic. Each droplet seemed to echo his internal battle, the lure of immediate relief from poverty versus the burden of responsibility inherited from generations of fighters. His mind replayed vivid images of his childhood, the warm embrace of his grandmother, the story she told about resilience, pride, and the unbreakable spirit of their people. Those memories were a stark reminder that while running away might provide temporary solace, it would never heal the deep wounds inflicted by years of neglect and systemic oppression. In quiet solitude, Jerome pored over the documents once again, each faded word and careful calculation reinforcing the idea that his path was already chosen by destiny. The wealth he had unearthed was not simply an inheritance. It was a test of character, a crucible in which he would be forged into a leader for those who had long been silenced. And yet, the temptation to run lingered. The easier path, the one paved with the immediate benefits of newfound wealth, whispered promises of comfort and security. But comfort, he realized, was a mirage that would evaporate in the harsh light of reality. True change required sacrifice, courage, and a willingness to stand up to forces far more entrenched than any personal adversary. After days of inner turmoil, Jerome reached a turning point. One chilly morning, as the city awoke to the muted hues of early light, he made a decision. With the ornate box secured and the documents safely tucked away, he resolved to confront his destiny head-on. The allure of a solitary escape would have to yield to the greater call of community and justice. In that resolute moment, as he prepared to leave his familiar surroundings behind, Jerome embraced the truth that the legacy of his ancestors was not a ticket to a life of quiet comfort, but a battle cry for transformative change. His path, though fraught with uncertainty and peril, would be one that honored the sacrifices of the past by forging a future for those still struggling in the present. With his decision firm in his heart, Jerome knew that he could not face this daunting challenge alone. Memories of his grandmother's wisdom and the tales of community resilience that she once recited propelled him to seek counsel from someone who had long been a beacon of hope in their neighborhood. Mr. Carter, the owner of a small, time-worn bookstore nestled on a quiet corner of the city, had always been more than just a businessman. Known for his sagacity and quiet commitment to social justice, Mr. Carter had built the bookstore into a haven for those who believed in the transformative power of knowledge and collective action. Jerome approached the bookstore on a brisk autumn afternoon, the golden light of late fall casting long shadows on the pavement. The bell above the door chimed softly as he stepped inside, the comforting scent of old paper and brewed coffee enveloping him. Mr. Carter, a dignified man with kind eyes and a quiet determination, greeted him with a knowing smile. Over steaming cups of tea, Jerome unfolded the harrowing tale of his recent discovery: the mysterious letter, the hidden map, and the clandestine chamber beneath the cemetery. He revealed the contents of the ornate box and the weighty responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. Listening intently, Mr. Carter's expression shifted from gentle curiosity to solemn understanding. He ran his weathered fingers over the brittle pages of a ledger kept in the back of the store, an old record of community donations and struggles, a living testament to the neighborhood's turbulent past. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," Mr. Carter murmured, his voice carrying the gravity of history. "She knew that our family's legacy was not just about surviving, but about rising together. The wealth you have discovered, it is as much a tool for healing as it is for hope." They talked for hours, dissecting every detail and weighing every consequence. Mr. Carter outlined the challenges that lay ahead, challenges that extended far beyond the mere distribution of money. He spoke of the forces that had long benefited from maintaining the status quo, of entrenched systems that would not relinquish power without a fight. Money with history attached, he cautioned, draws eyes. It has the power to create change, but it can also provoke dangerous adversaries who are unwilling to see that change. Jerome listened, absorbing every word like a lifeline. Here was a man who had dedicated his life to the quiet battles of community building, someone who understood that real transformation was built brick by brick, through perseverance and solidarity. Over the following days, Jerome and Mr. Carter devised a plan. They agreed that the inheritance should be used to establish a discrete foundation, one that would support education, legal aid, and affordable housing in neighborhoods long left to languish. They identified a network of trustworthy allies, community organizers, educators, and local activists who shared their vision of a future where justice and opportunity were not the privileges of the few, but the rights of all. Each meeting was charged with determination as they charted out strategies to distribute the funds without attracting unwanted attention. The plan was intricate, designed to channel the money through multiple layers of oversight, ensuring that every dollar served its intended purpose. Jerome felt a renewed sense of purpose during these sessions. The legacy he had inherited was evolving from a solitary burden into a shared mission. It was a mission that demanded sacrifice, transparency, and unwavering commitment. As he left Mr. Carter's bookstore after one such meeting, the cool evening air seemed to carry a promise that this new chapter of his life was not just about reclaiming lost heritage, but about paving the way for a brighter, more just future. With guidance from trusted mentors and the unyielding support of a community that believed in change, Jerome stepped forward with cautious optimism, ready to transform an ancient inheritance into a force that would ripple outwards, healing wounds and igniting hope. In the weeks that followed, as Jerome began to implement the foundation's modest first steps, an unsettling awareness crept into his daily life. It started with fleeting glances, a stranger on a bus, a dark sedan idling near his apartment, and slowly evolved into unmistakable signs that he was being watched. Every shadow, every unexpected sound in the dead of night, seemed to echo a warning that his actions had not gone unnoticed. Jerome's initial determination now faced an unforeseen adversary, an ominous presence lurking in the periphery of his newfound purpose. One rainy evening, after a long day spent orchestrating community meetings and coordinating with Mr. Carter's network, Jerome returned home to find subtle signs of intrusion. A misplaced object, a door slightly ajar, and a lingering sense that someone had been in his space, all served as harbingers of danger. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and resolve. He knew that the inheritance, with its deep historical ties and promise of radical change, had attracted those who preferred the status quo, those who would stop at nothing to keep power in their hands. Determined not to be cowed, Jerome increased his vigilance. He began to notice patterns. Anonymous letters slipped under his door, cryptic messages sent to his phone, each carrying a chilling command: stop what you're doing. Even in public spaces, he sensed watchful eyes behind the masks of ordinary passersby. One incident, however, stood out starkly in his memory. On a foggy night, as Jerome left a discreet meeting with trusted allies, a man in a dark overcoat trailed him. The man's presence was unnerving, his gaze unblinking as he maintained a distance that felt calculated. When Jerome finally confronted him on a deserted street, the stranger merely whispered, "You think you're different. Money isn't just money, it's power, and you're meddling in matters beyond your comprehension." The words hung in the cold air like a threat, a promise of retribution from forces that would not allow change to disrupt their dominion. Though the threat sent shivers down his spine, it also steeled Jerome's resolve. Every warning, every act of intimidation, became fuel for his determination to honor the legacy entrusted to him. He knew that the path of transformative change was fraught with peril, and that those who had thrived on injustice would not relinquish their grip without a struggle. Instead of retreating, Jerome redoubled his efforts. He began working more covertly, establishing secure lines of communication with his network, and even employing countermeasures to obscure his movements. Mr. Carter and other community allies rallied around him, each contributing ideas and resources to protect the nascent foundation from prying eyes. Late one night, as he sat in his apartment poring over plans and strategic documents, Jerome paused to reflect on how far he had come. The legacy that had been hidden beneath tombstones and secret chambers was now stirring in the open, challenging old powers and promising new beginnings. Even as the shadow of danger loomed large, he felt an unyielding certainty that every sacrifice was paving the way for a future where justice would prevail. With the mysterious threats as a constant reminder of the stakes, Jerome understood that his mission was not just about redistributing wealth. It was about reclaiming dignity, rewriting history, and empowering those who had long been silenced. In the midst of rising tensions and surreptitious threats, Jerome and Mr. Carter convened a series of clandestine meetings with trusted members of the community. Their objective was as clear as it was ambitious: to transform the secret inheritance into a tangible force for societal change. In a small, dimly lit room behind the bookstore, sheltered from prying eyes, they spread out maps, ledgers, and handwritten notes on a scarred wooden table. Each document told a story of a past marred by oppression, but also hinted at a future where those very struggles could be overturned by unity and resourcefulness. Their plan was meticulously designed to bypass the watchful eyes of adversaries. Instead of a single, centralized fund, they would create a decentralized network of community initiatives. The inheritance would be split into discrete portions, each allocated to support specific projects: scholarships for underprivileged youth, legal aid for those facing systemic injustice, affordable housing projects in neglected neighborhoods, and microloans to empower local entrepreneurs. The idea was to build a self-sustaining ecosystem, a network of support that would gradually erode the foundations of inequality while fostering an environment of shared prosperity. Jerome took on the role of both organizer and guardian of the legacy. He began reaching out to community leaders, educators, and activists who had long labored at the fringes of the system. Their meetings were held in secret, often in the backrooms of community centers or in the quiet solitude of local cafes. With every conversation, the plan evolved, gathering momentum like a well-tended flame. Jerome's vision was not merely to distribute money. It was to empower people with the tools and confidence needed to reshape their own lives and communities. The emphasis was on long-term, sustainable change rather than short-lived relief. Despite the careful planning, Jerome was all too aware of the risks. The inheritance's origins, shrouded in decades of rebellion and hidden wealth, had already drawn unwanted attention. Their plan had to be airtight. With the help of Mr. Carter and his network, Jerome established covert channels for transferring funds, encrypting communications, and safeguarding the identities of those involved. Each measure was a necessary precaution against the powerful interests that thrived on the status quo, a status quo that had long denied opportunity to the oppressed. During one particularly tense meeting, as rain battered the windows of their secret hideout, an elderly community elder spoke with quiet passion about the legacy of past struggles. Our ancestors fought not just for survival, but for the promise of a better tomorrow, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Now, we have the means to fulfill that promise. His words resonated deeply with everyone in the room, stirring a collective resolve to see the plan through despite the looming threats. In the weeks that followed, Jerome coordinated with local activists to establish pilot projects in the most neglected corners of the city. A small community center was set up to offer tutoring, legal advice, and vocational training. The money, carefully funneled through trusted intermediaries, began to transform lives in subtle but profound ways. Every success, no matter how modest, was a victory against a system built on centuries of oppression. Jerome documented these successes, knowing that transparency and accountability were essential to maintaining public trust and fending off those who would seek to sabotage their efforts. Even as the foundation began to flourish, the danger remained ever present. Every new initiative was met with silent resistance from unseen forces determined to preserve their control. But rather than retreat, Jerome's resolve hardened. The clandestine meetings, the careful distribution of funds, and the unwavering commitment of his community formed a bulwark against those who thrived on inequality. In the quiet moments between strategic discussions, Jerome often recalled the weighty responsibility he had inherited, the legacy of blood, struggle, and unyielding hope. And with every step forward, he affirmed that the money was not just a relic of the past, but a beacon lighting the way to a more just future. As the Foundation's efforts began to manifest in real, tangible improvements within the community, the threats that had once lurked in the shadows became bolder and more direct. Jerome's phone buzzed with anonymous messages that bore ominous warnings. Late at night, as he was returning from a discreet meeting with community organizers, he found his apartment door slightly ajar, a silent intrusion meant to unsettle him. Yet, these acts of intimidation only served to strengthen his resolve. His ancestors had battled against overwhelming odds, and now it was his turn to stand firm. One particularly chilling evening, Jerome was confronted by a group of men in dark clothing near a deserted intersection. Their leader, a man whose cold eyes glinted with menace, sneered as he uttered, "You think you can change the world with stolen money? You know nothing of how power is meant to be held." The words, laced with contempt and a warning of retribution, sent shivers down Jerome's spine. However, even as fear gripped him momentarily, he recalled the countless sacrifices that had paved the way for his mission. With a voice steadier than he felt, he responded, "This isn't about stolen money. It's about reclaiming what rightfully belongs to those who have been oppressed for too long." His defiant tone marked a turning point, a clear statement that he would not be cowed by those clinging to outdated systems of power. The confrontation only deepened the resolve of his supporters. In subsequent meetings, community members shared their own experiences of harassment and injustice, each story reinforcing the urgent need for change. Jerome began to understand that the struggle was not merely a financial endeavor. It was a battle against a historical legacy of exploitation and neglect. The hidden wealth, unearthed from beneath the gravestones and secret chambers, had become a symbol of resistance. It was a tangible reminder that the fight for justice was as much about confronting the painful memories of the past as it was about forging a better future. Determined to address the threats head-on, Jerome organized a community forum in a modest, repurposed hall on the outskirts of the city. Neighbors, local activists, and even a few courageous insiders from the old guard gathered to discuss strategies for safeguarding the foundation and advancing their shared vision. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of anxiety and defiant optimism. Jerome spoke passionately about the heritage that bound them together, a legacy of struggle that now demanded collective action. He recounted the ancient stories from the journal, the sacrifices of his great-great-grandfather, and the enduring hope that had always been the lifeblood of their people. In the wake of the forum, Jerome took steps to publicly document the history behind the inheritance. Through carefully crafted articles and discreet video recordings, he began to reveal the truth of his family's past, the clandestine battles, the hidden networks of support, and the unyielding determination to reclaim dignity from the jaws of oppression. This act of unveiling the past was both cathartic and revolutionary. It forced the oppressors into the light, challenging them to justify their hold on power in the face of historical evidence. Despite the mounting pressure and increasingly frequent threats, Jerome's commitment did not waver. Every act of intimidation was met with strategic countermeasures, every whispered warning with a public declaration of his mission. The confrontation with his past had become an essential part of his journey, one that would not allow him to step away until justice was not only promised but delivered. In that fraught, turbulent time, Jerome emerged as both a guardian of his ancestors' legacy and a fearless advocate for a future where every voice mattered. In the early light of a hopeful dawn, Jerome stood before a large gathering in a revitalized community center, the very heart of the neighborhood he had helped transform. The building, once abandoned and marked by neglect, had been reborn as a symbol of resilience and progress. Today was not just another day. It was a celebration of legacy, of struggle, and of a future reimagined through unity and shared purpose. As Jerome prepared to speak to the crowd, he felt the weight of every sacrifice made by his ancestors and the thousands who had suffered in silence for far too long. Standing at the podium, Jerome's voice resonated with quiet determination. He recounted his journey, from the sorrowful farewell at his grandmother's grave to the eerie discovery beneath the cemetery, from the revelations hidden within an ancient journal to the secret treasure that had redefined his destiny. Each word was imbued with the spirit of those who had come before him, their sacrifices now woven into the fabric of a movement that promised hope and change. The crowd listened intently as he spoke of a legacy reclaimed not through personal gain, but through collective empowerment, a legacy built on the conviction that every life held value and that justice was worth fighting for. Jerome shared how the hidden inheritance, once seen as a relic of the past, had been transformed into a network of community initiatives. Scholarships had been established, legal aid programs flourished, and local businesses were given new hope with microloans that ignited entrepreneurship. He spoke of small victories, a child's smile in a newly lit classroom, the grateful nod of a single mother as she received assistance, the quiet determination of a young man who now believed that his dreams were within reach. These were not just success stories. They were the tangible results of a legacy that refused to be silenced. Throughout his speech, Jerome acknowledged the threats and challenges that had sought to derail their progress. Yet he reminded the audience that every warning, every act of intimidation, had only fortified their resolve. The community, united in purpose, had turned fear into action, oppression into opportunity. He spoke passionately about the transformative power of truth, the unearthing of a painful past that, when confronted head-on, could serve as the catalyst for a brighter future. As the day drew to a close, Jerome's words gave way to a resounding silence, a silence filled with hope and the promise of renewal. The applause that followed was not for one man alone, but for every person who had dared to dream of change. Standing amid the cheers, Jerome felt a deep, abiding connection to the lineage that had brought him here. His great-great-grandfather's struggle, his grandmother's love, and the countless voices of his community echoed in unison. Their fight was not over, but had only just begun. In that moment, Jerome understood that the legacy he had reclaimed was more than just an inheritance of money or documents. It was a living testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a promise that no matter how dark the past, light could always be found when people came together to forge a new path. As he stepped down from the podium, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter, transformed into a beacon that would guide future generations. With every smile, every tear, and every act of kindness that followed, the legacy of his ancestors lived on, igniting hope where despair had once reigned. The celebration that day marked not an end, but the beginning of a renewed chapter, a chapter where history was acknowledged, wounds were healed, and the promise of a better tomorrow shone brightly. Jerome's journey had taught him that true change was neither swift nor easy, but it was inevitable when fueled by the collective will of a community determined to rise. And so, as the crowd dispersed into the warm embrace of a new day, Jerome looked toward the horizon with unwavering resolve. He knew that the legacy reclaimed was not his alone. It was a shared inheritance, a continuous flame that would light the way for all who dared to dream of justice and a better future. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support means the world and helps bring more amazing stories to life. See you in the next one.